It always starts the same way. You're standing ankle-deep in the surf, the waves lapping against your legs. When you see Ida's shadow gliding just beneath the surface, a fin slices through the water like a knife. In that instant, your heart leaps into your throat. You don't know how big it is. You don't know how close it will come. All you know is that a shark is out there. And suddenly the whole ocean feels like it belongs to something else. For Americans, this image is burned into our culture. Maybe it's because of Jaws, Spielberg's 1975 masterpiece that made beachgoers all over the country look twice at every dark shape in the water. Maybe it's because of Discovery Channel's Shark Week, with its slow-motion breaching shots of great whites turning seals into ragdolls. Or maybe it's because deep down, we know that the shark represents something primal, an ancient predator that doesn't play by our rules. And yet, if you look at the numbers, sharks really shouldn't scare us. Each year, fewer than 10 people worldwide die from shark attacks. Meanwhile, humans kill an estimated 100 million sharks annually, often for nothing more than their fins. Statistically speaking, you're more likely to die from a falling coconut or a vending machine accident than a shark. But fear doesn't care about statistics. Fear comes from the unknown, the dark water below, the flash of movement, the sudden violence of teeth you never saw coming. Here's the twist. If modern sharks give us chills, the fossil record tells us that their ancestors were even more terrifying. These creatures have been patrolling Earth's oceans for nearly 450 million years. They were apex predators before the first dinosaur ever hatched, before the first trees grew tall, before mammals even existed. And over those hundreds of millions of years, they've attacked just about everything that ever dared to share their oceans. Other sharks, flying reptiles, giant marine reptiles, whales, and eventually, humans too. This is the story of sharks as history's most enduring hunters, not just as the sleek silhouettes we fear today, but as ancient killers whose bite marks are still etched into stone. From Devonian cannibals to Ginsu-toothed giants, from whale slayers to the earliest human victims, the trail of evidence is written in fossils, skeletons, and even ancient art. It's not a story of random attacks. It's a story of survival, adaptation, and an unbroken chain of predation stretching back almost 500 million years. So the next time you wade into the surf and feel that twinge of unease, remember this. It's not just your imagination. It's instinct. Because for longer than we can fathom, sharks have been the dark shape beneath the waves, waiting, watching, and striking. If sharks scare us today, it's because evolution has spent nearly 500 million years perfecting them. They're not just fish with extra teeth. They are survival machines, tuned and refined by deep time in ways that make even our most advanced technology look clumsy. On paper, their design seems almost too simple. Take away the heavy bones. Replace them with cartilage. Swap smooth scales for microscopic teeth-like denticles that reduce drag. Give them 5 to 7 gill slits instead of just one. Add rows of teeth that never stop being replaced, like an endless conveyor belt of knives. That's it, right? But if it were really that simple, every predator would look like a shark. The truth is, their design is anything but Simplite's genius. Start with the skeleton. Sharks don't have bones. At least not the way we do. Their bodies are made of cartilage, the same flexible stuff that makes up your ears and nose. But in sharks, cartilage isn't weak. It's light, strong, and partially calcified in places where they need extra support. This makes them agile in the water, able to twist, roll, and launch with bursts of speed that leave prey no chance. If bony fish are built like heavy pickup trucks, sharks are built like lightweight race cars. Then there's the skin. To us, it looks smooth. To the touch, it feels like sandpaper. Those dermal denticlest, tiny scales shaped like teeth not only protect sharks from parasites and injury, but also reduce drag, making them some of the most hydrodynamic creatures on Earth. Olympic swimsuit designers have tried to copy this pattern, and even NASA has studied shark skin for aircraft design. But sharks didn't need research labs. They figured it out 400 million years ago. Of course, no predator survives this long without senses that give it the edge. Sharks see well in low light. But it's their other senses that truly make them extraordinary. They can detect a drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. They can pick up vibrations from miles away through their lateral line system, a row of sensors that lets them feel the movements of other creatures in the water. And most impressively, they can sense electricity. Every living animal gives off a faint electrical field when its muscles move. Sharks can detect it with special organs called ampullae of Lorenzini. That means even if a fish hides under the sand or in murky water, the shark knows it's there. Imagine if you could see people in the dark just by hearing their heartbeats. That's what sharks do every day. And then, of course, there are the jaws. Sharks don't have just one set of teeth. They have rows upon rows, hundreds of them, always being replaced. A great white might go through 20,000 teeth in its lifetime. Break one, no problem. Another slides forward in days. The shapes vary by species, serrated for sawing through flesh, needle-like for gripping slippery prey, crushing plates for cracking shells. But they all serve the same purposito: turn prey into food. Fast. This combination: lightweight skeleton, streamlined skin, supernatural senses, endless teeth makes sharks one of evolution's greatest success stories. They've survived 5 mass extinctions, including the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. They've adapted to every ocean, from warm Caribbean shallows to the freezing Arctic, from tiny lantern sharks that fit in your hand to whale sharks bigger than a school bus. Their variety is staggering. Some species give live birth. Others lay egg cases called mermaids' purses. Some ambush their prey like assassins. Others run them down in bursts of speed like sprinters. And yet, through all this variety, one truth has remained constant: sharks are predators. For hundreds of millions of years, they've been at or near the top of the food chain. They're not villains, but they are hunters evolved to sense weakness, to exploit it, and to survive. That's why the image of a shark still makes us uneasy. Deep down, we recognize perfection when we see it. We know we're looking at something honed by time itself, something that doesn't need to change because it already works. And in our bones, we understand what that means. If you meet a shark in its world, you're not the main character. You're the potential prey. This is the evolutionary foundation of the story we're about to tell. Because once you understand how sharks became what they are, the fossils that follow snapshots of their most brutal encounters become even more chilling. These weren't accidents. They were the inevitable result of a predator built to rule the seas. To see the first real evidence of sharks being sharks, we have to rewind far deeper than the age of dinosaurs. Go back some 360 million years, into the Devonian period, a time when life was still experimenting. Forests were just beginning to grow on land. The first winged insects had only recently taken flight. Vertebrates were just dipping their toes into a brand new world of swamps and rivers. And yet, in the oceans, sharks were already making a name for themselves. One of the strangest and most telling fossils from this time belongs to a shark called Cladoselache. At first glance, it looked remarkably modern for something so ancient. About 6 feet long, sleek and torpedo-shaped, with stiff fins and a forked tail, it was built for speed, eerily similar to the outline of a modern mako or small great white. But its teeth told a different story. They weren't broad, serrated blades for tearing chunks out of prey. They were narrow, cusped spikes, perfect for grasping and holding, but not for slicing. That meant Cladoselache didn't shred its prey. It swallowed them whole. And we know this because of one extraordinary fossil discovered near Lake Erie. Most of the time, soft tissue vanishes in the fossil record. But in this case, the conditions were perfect. The Cladoselache specimen was so well preserved that paleontologists could see its stomach contents. And inside that stomach, another shark, a juvenile, swallowed tail first, curled up inside the predator's gut. Think about that. We're not just looking at the bones of a long-dead animal. We're looking at the exact moment of predation, frozen in time for 360 million years. Predator and prey locked together forever in stone. Like a crime scene from the dawn of complex life. The details make it even more dramatic. The swallowed shark's tail was pointing out of the stomach, meaning the predator had caught its victim from behind. overtaken it in a burst of speed, and gulped it down tail first. This wasn't a slow ambush. It was a high-speed chase, a sprint in ancient seas that ended with one shark inside another. And here's the kicker. Scientists aren't entirely sure what species the victim was. It may have been a different shark, but it could also have been another Cladoselache. If that's the case, this fossil doesn't just show the first shark attack we know of. It shows the earliest evidence of cannibalism in the entire animal kingdom. Long before dinosaurs fought each other, long before mammals turned on their own, sharks may have been the first creatures to eat their kin. That's not as shocking as it sounds when you consider sharks today. Some modern species, like sand tiger sharks, are infamous for intrauterine cannibalism, embryos eating each other inside their mother's womb, with only the strongest pups surviving to birth. Cannibalism is part of their evolutionary toolkit, a brutal but effective way of ensuring survival of the fittest. The Cladoselache fossil suggests that this behavior stretches all the way back to the earliest days of shark evolution. There's also something poetic about it. When we picture sharks, we think of them as threats to other creatures: fish, seals, whales, even us. But the very first evidence of a shark attack ever recorded doesn't involve another species at all. It's shark versus shark. From the very beginning, their deadliest enemy may have been themselves. For paleontologists, fossils like this are priceless. They don't just show what animals looked like. They show how they lived, how they hunted, how they died. Every tooth mark, every bone fragment, every swallowed skeleton is a data point in the story of life. And the story that Cladoselache tells is clear: by the Devonian, before trees had reached the sky, sharks had already mastered the art of predation. They were fast, they were ruthless, and sometimes they were cannibals. It's a haunting reminder that from the very beginning, sharks weren't just survivors. They were predators, honed by instinct, willing to eat anything that moved, even each other. Leap forward nearly 300 million years. The Devonian seas are long gone, and the world is now in the grip of the dinosaurs. The Cretaceous period, about 80 million years ago, is a golden age for giant reptiles. Mosasaurs patrol the oceans like living submarines. Pterosaurs soar through the skies with wingspans wider than school buses. On land, duck-billed dinosaurs graze in herds while tyrannosaurs lurk in the shadows. But in the waters of North America, a vast inland ocean called the Western Interior Seaway, the undisputed terror was a shark. Its name, Cretoxyrhina. If you've ever seen an infomercial for a Ginsu knife, you know. The one that cuts through tin cans and then slices a tomato. You got a pretty good metaphor for this animal. Paleontologists nicknamed it the Ginsu Shark because its teeth were long, sharp, and blade-like. Imagine an orca-sized shark, about 25 feet long, weighing close to 2,000 pounds, with a mouthful of knives for teeth. It wasn't the biggest predator in the seaway. That title might go to the mosasaurs, but it was one of the most feared. And we know why. Thanks to fossils that capture its brutal efficiency. Take the case of a pteranodon, one of the most common flying reptiles of the time. In 1965, paleontologists uncovered a near-complete specimen in Kansas. At first glance, it looked routine. Pteranodon fossils are abundant. But this one had something extraordinary: a large shark tooth embedded in its neck vertebra. The tooth wasn't from any random fish. It matched Cretoxyrhina perfectly. That means one day, 80 million years ago, a pteranodon skimmed too close to the water. Cretoxyrhina saw its chance. With a burst of speed, it surged upward and clamped its jaws around the pterosaur's neck. The impact was so violent that one of its teeth broke off and lodged permanently in the bone. The pteranodon likely died instantly, pulled into the waves by a predator from below. It's not often you think of sharks hunting flying reptiles. But here's the fossil proof. Even the sky wasn't safe when Cretoxyrhina was around. The hit list doesn't end there. Fossilized shells of giant turtles show puncture marks where Cretoxyrhina bit straight through armor. Mosasaur skeletons, massive marine reptiles that could grow longer than a school bus, have bite marks that tore chunks out of their spines. One Tylosaurus skull even shows evidence of its snout being nearly severed in half by a shark bite. These weren't glancing nips. They were devastating. Killshot attacks. And it wasn't just living animals. Cretoxyrhina seems to have been an opportunist. Fossilized remains of hadrosaurs. Duck-billed dinosaurs swept out to sea after storms. Show shark bite marks too. To Cretoxyrhina, it didn't matter if you were a pterosaur, a turtle, a mosasaur, or a drowned dinosaur, you were food. What made this shark so deadly? Part of it was size. At 25 feet, it was larger than almost any predator in the seaway except the biggest mosasaurs. But it was also speed. Its streamlined body allowed it to rocket through the water with bursts fast enough to overtake swift prey. Add in jaws packed with serrated blades, and you have a predator that could strike hard and slice clean. While modern great whites prefer to attack from below and retreat, Cretoxyrhina seems to have gone straight for the kill. To put it in modern terms, imagine an orca with the teeth of a butcher's knife set, attacking everything from seabirds to submarines. That was Cretoxyrhina. And yet, despite its reign of terror, Cretoxyrhina didn't last forever. By the end of the Cretaceous, it had vanished. Maybe it was outcompeted by the mosasaurs. Maybe climate change or food shortages did it in. Whatever the reason, it disappeared millions of years before the asteroid struck and ended the age of dinosaurs. But while it lived, it left a fossil record of violence unlike almost any other shark. The image that stays with me is that pteranodon vertebra with the tooth still stuck in it. It's such a vivid, undeniable moment, like a crime scene frozen in stone. 1 second, a flying reptile soared peacefully above the water. The next, a shark's bite ended it forever. When you look at that fossil, you're not just looking at bone and enamel. You're looking at the memory of a kill, carried across 80 million years. In the Western Interior Seaway, Cretoxyrhina was the nightmare you never wanted to meet. And thanks to the fossils it left behind, its reputation as the Ginsu Shark is as sharp today as it was in the Cretaceous. If Cretoxyrhina was the Ginsu knife of the Cretaceous, then millions of years later nature forged its sledgehammer, Megalodon. Even the name carries weight. Mega means great. Odin means tooth, literally. The giant tooth. And those teeth, some nearly 7 inches long, are the biggest shark teeth ever found. You can hold one in your palm and feel like you're carrying a piece of a monster. Megalodon lived between about 23 and 3.6 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had gone extinct. By then, mammals ruled the land, and the oceans were home to the ancestors of modern whales, seals, and dolphins. In that new marine ecosystem, Megalodon wasn't just another predator. It was the apex of apex predators, the undisputed ruler of the seas. Size estimates vary, but the consensus today is staggering. The smallest estimates put adults at 50 feet long. The largest stretch up to 80 feet, roughly the length of a basketball court. Weight, over 100 tons. That puts Megalodon in the same league as today's blue whale, the largest animal to ever live. Imagine a shark longer than a semi-truck and heavier than 10 school buses. Now imagine it hungry, needing perhaps 100,000 calories every single day just to survive. How do you feed something like that? With the biggest prey available, whales. And the fossil record bears the scars. Along coastlines around the world, paleontologists have found whale bones marked by giant serrated tooth gouges. In some cases, Megalodon teeth are still lodged in the skeletons. These fossils aren't just bones. They're evidence of violence on a scale hard to imagine. One of the most dramatic cases was discovered off the coast of what is now Maryland. There, researchers uncovered a 15-million-year-old whale skeleton with its vertebrae shattered in ways no modern whale has ever been found. The bones showed massive compression fractures, catastrophic breakage that scientists concluded could only have been caused by a colossal force. The culprit? A side strike from Megalodon. Based on the angle, it looks like the shark ambushed the whale from the flank, slammed its jaws into its back, and thrashed violently. The power of that strike was so intense that some researchers believe it could have literally lifted the whale out of the water. Here's the chilling part. That whale actually survived the attack. At least, for a while. The vertebrae showed signs of healing. New bone growth that only happens when an animal lives weeks beyond an injury. Imagine the scene, a whale with a half-shattered spine, swimming in agony, slowly recovering, only to die later from infection. For Megalodon, the attack had failed. But for us, the fossil preserves the sheer brutality of its hunting strategy. Another fossil tells an even stranger story. In North Carolina, paleontologists found a single sperm whale tooth with deep serrated gouges across its surface. The damage was in the part of the tooth that would have been embedded in the whale's jaw. That means the shark bit through the jawbone first before leaving marks on the tooth itself. Think about that. Most predators target soft tissue. Megalodon was so powerful it didn't matter. Bone, cartilage, teeth, everything was on the menu. It was less like a surgeon and more like a wrecking ball with fins. Some scientists debated whether this was scavenging, a shark biting into a whale carcass. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The bite was too forceful, too deep. This wasn't a casual nibble on something already dead. It was a deliberate, devastating attack, possibly the shark trying to disable the whale by destroying its jaw, preventing it from eating or defending itself. Either way, the result was the same. For the whale, it was catastrophic. For Megalodon, just another day at the office. What makes Megalodon truly terrifying is that it didn't have to be precise. Great whites, our modern poster shark, usually go for the soft underbelly or attack from below. Megalodon didn't bother. With a bite force estimated at over 180,000 newtons, possibly the strongest of any animal in history, it could strike anywhere and cause catastrophic damage. Spine, rib cage, skull, it didn't matter. Its jaws were designed to pulverize, to turn giants into floating carrion. Now picture yourself in that world. The oceans echo with whale songs. Pods of early baleen whales migrate across open waters. Dolphins leap and play in the surf. And then, somewhere below, a shadow the size of a city bus glides silently. No dorsal fin slicing the surface. No warning. Just a sudden rush of water. A flash of white jaws. And the world's largest shark slams into a whale with the force of a freight train. That's not Hollywood. That's the fossil record. For us today, Megalodon has become a cultural icon. Documentaries speculate about its hunting strategies. Movies imagine it still lurking in the deep. Souvenir shops sell replicas of its teeth. There's a reason for the fascination. It represents something bigger than fear. It represents power, scale, and the raw dominance of nature. If the great white is enough to keep us out of the water, Megalodon is enough to make us question the ocean itself. And yet, for all its dominance, Megalodon eventually disappeared. About 3.6 million years ago, it went extinct. The reasons are still debated: cooling oceans, shrinking coastal nurseries, competition from smaller but faster predators like orcas, or perhaps the rise of modern great whites. Whatever the cause, the ocean's ultimate titan vanished. But in its absence, it left a legacy: teeth the size of your hand, whalebone scarred with impossible wounds, fossils that tell stories of hunts so brutal they make even the great white look like a lightweight. When we look at Megalodon, we're reminded that once, not too long ago in geological terms, the ocean belonged to a shark so massive, so unstoppable, that even whales, the largest creatures ever to live, were not safe. Megalodon wasn't just a shark. It was a force of nature, a titan slayer. And even though it's gone, the echoes of its reign still haunt the deep. So far, our story has been about sharks attacking everything else: other sharks, pterosaurs, turtles, mosasaurs, whales. But eventually, humans entered the water. And when we did, it was only a matter of time before sharks added us to their long list of victims. For centuries, shark attacks on people were just stories, whispers among sailors, legends told by coastal villagers, warnings passed down in island communities. But in the fossil and archaeological record, there are a handful of cases that take those stories out of the realm of myth and ground them in chilling reality. One of the clearest comes from Japan's Seto Inland Sea, dating back about 3 For 100 years during the Japan period, archaeologists excavated the skeleton of an adult male. At first glance, the bones seemed ordinary, but closer inspection revealed something astonishing and horrifying. His body bore nearly 790 deep wounds, each one consistent with the serrated cuts of shark teeth. Many of his ribs had been snapped, and his left hand and both feet were missing entirely. His chest cavity and abdomen had been eviscerated. In modern forensic terms, this man's death reads like the aftermath of a shark attack at the beach, today only amplified. Paleontologists compared the bite marks with modern species and concluded that a large great white or possibly a tiger shark was responsible. The scenario is easy to imagine. The man was probably out fishing, diving, or gathering shellfish when the shark struck. The wounds showed desperate attempts at defense, arms outstretched, forearms bitten as he tried to push the predator away. But there was no escape. In one violent encounter, he became history's first confirmed shark attack victim. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. That case in Japan may not be the oldest. Half a world away, on the coast of Peru, another skeleton tells a similar story. This one is about 6,000 years old, belonging to a teenager, no more than 17. His remains show unmistakable signs of shark predation: a missing leg, hip bones gnawed away, deep bite marks scarring his forearms. Just like the Japanese victim, his wounds suggest he was attacked in shallow water, possibly while fishing. The forearm injuries scream of self-defense. Even today, when surfers or swimmers are attacked, their arms often take the brunt as they instinctively shield themselves. The tragedy doesn't end there. The Peruvian youth wasn't found drifting in the sea. His body had been retrieved and buried in a decorated grave. That detail matters. It suggests the community regarded his death as unusual, maybe even sacred. They'd seen death before. Of course, disease, hunger, violence, but a death by shark was something different, something terrifying, something worth marking. Now, scientists debate whether this Peruvian case should count as the first. Unlike the Japanese skeleton, it hasn't been formally published in a peer-reviewed journal. Some argue the wounds might have been misinterpreted. But even if we leave it unofficial, the point is clear. Humans and sharks have been crossing paths for thousands of years, and not always peacefully. When you think about it, that shouldn't surprise us. Coastal peoples around the world have always depended on the sea. Fishing, diving, swimming, these weren't luxuries. They were survival. And in those same waters swam apex predators that had been perfecting their hunting skills for 400 million years. Encounters were inevitable. For modern Americans, shark attacks are cultural touchstones. We all remember the summer of 1916, when a series of shark attacks along the New Jersey shore left 4 people dead and helped inspire Jaws. We know the statistics: dozens of attacks each year, a handful of fatalities. We also know the images: helicopters scanning beaches, lifeguards blowing whistles, dorsal fins breaking the waterline. But those fears go back further than Hollywood. They're ancient. They're carved into skeletons lying in the dirt of Japan and Peru. And here's the sobering irony. Even though these early cases prove sharks have attacked humans for thousands of years, the reality is that we've always been the bigger threat. Sharks kill maybe 10 people a year worldwide. Humans kill 100 million sharks every single year. For food, for sport, for fins. Compared to us, sharks are amateurs at slaughter. But when we step into their world, when we wade into the surf, dive for fish, or paddle out on a board, we feel the same vulnerability that Jaman fishermen felt 400 years ago, or that teenager in Peru felt 6,000 years ago. We're reminded that in the ocean, we're not at the top of the food chain. We're just another potential meal. Not every shark story is about triumph. Sometimes, even the ocean's top predators make fatal mistakes. One of the strangest and most revealing examples comes not from a giant whale slayer or an airborne ambush, but from a medium-sized shark in the early Jurassic, about 183 million years ago. Its name was Hybodus, at around 10 feet long. Hybodus was no Megalodon. In fact, it looked fairly ordinary, with a body plan not unlike modern sharks. But it had two distinctive features: a pair of sharp spines in front of its dorsal fins like devilish little horns and teeth suited for gripping slippery prey. Fossils tell us it was an active hunter, fast and efficient. For millions of years, it did well, until one individual made a decision that turned out to be its last. The fossil in question was so beautifully preserved it seemed almost like the shark had died yesterday. Not only were its bones intact, but so were the impressions of its body outline and, most astonishingly, its stomach contents. Inside was a dense, circular mass of prey. At first, paleontologists thought they were looking at some strange mineral growth. But on closer inspection, they realized it was a ball of belemnite sentient squid-like creatures with long, bullet-shaped skeletons. There weren't just a few. There were over 100 belemnites, all swallowed in quick succession. The Hybodus had been gorging itself, devouring squid after squid until its stomach was completely packed. It might have been the ultimate buffet binge in Jurassic seas. But it came at a cost. The enormous bolus of hard, indigestible skeletons clogged its stomach. Either the shark choked, or its stomach ruptured. Either way, it died not from battle or predator attack, but from its own appetite. It's a strangely human story. Who hasn't overindulged at a meal? But for Hybodus, overeating wasn't just uncomfortable, it was fatal. The fossil preserves a cautionary tale. Even apex predators aren't invincible. Sometimes, they're undone by their own instincts. There's a second fossil, equally haunting, that reinforces the lesson. In it, a belemnite had caught a lobster, clutched tightly in its hooked tentacles. Victory seemed certain. But before the squid-like creature could enjoy its prize, it was struck and killed, likely by a Hybodus. Judging by the cusp-shaped bite marks, the shark didn't even bother to eat its victim afterward, suggesting it was already full. One instant, the belemnite was winning. The next, it was just collateral damage in a predator's reflex strike. Together, these fossils show us that shark predation in the Jurassic wasn't always neat or predictable. Hybodus was a skilled hunter. Yes, but also fallible. Sometimes it ate too much. Sometimes it killed just because it could. These glimpses remind us that even hundreds of millions of years ago, sharks were complex predators, not monsters. Not machines, but animals with instincts that could both ensure survival and cause their downfall. Long before modern science could measure bite force or carbon date fossils, people were already telling stories about sharks. To ancient civilizations, the ocean was both lifeline and terror, and few creatures embodied that terror more vividly than sharks. The earliest written account comes from Herodotus, the father of history. Writing in 440 BC, he describes the disastrous Persian naval campaign of 492 BC, when storms wrecked hundreds of ships off the coast of Greece. According to his account, as many as 20,000 sailors were thrown into the sea and many never came back up. Herodotus wrote of sea monsters descending upon the survivors. Modern scholars believe those monsters were almost certainly sharks, drawn to the chaos and carnage of the wreck. Whether exaggerated or not, the story captured a truth that sailors of the Aegean knew well. When a ship went down, sharks often came. A few centuries later, the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder offered his own observations in Natural History, 77 AD. He described divers harvesting sponges in the Mediterranean and the dangers they faced from sharks, creatures he called dogfish. His words are strangely specific, noting that sharks would aim for the divers' heels, groins, and pale parts. It's a reminder that even 2,000 years ago, people knew how targeted and frightening a shark's attack could feel. Pliny advised that the only way to survive was to confront the predator directly, to make the shark fear the diver as much as the diver feared the shark. It's a strikingly modern insight. Intimidation, not flight, sometimes kept you alive. But perhaps the most evocative evidence isn't written at all. It's visual. On the island of Ischia, in the Gulf of Naples, archaeologists uncovered a 700-year-old Greek vase. The painted scene shows shipwrecked sailors in the water, surrounded by enormous fish with unmistakable shark-like features. One figure appears to be in the jaws of a predator, his head caught in its mouth. Scholars believe this is the earliest known artistic depiction of a shark attack. Imagine the impact on viewers at the time long before movies or photographs. This was how people processed the terror of the sea, by painting it on clay, freezing the nightmare into art. For ancient Greeks and Romans, sharks were not just animals. They were symbols. They represented the dangers of travel, the unpredictability of the sea, the thin line between survival and death. When modern Americans watch Jaws or tune into Shark Week, we're doing something very similar, turning fear into story, into culture, into something we can share and control. These early accounts remind us that humanity's uneasy relationship with sharks is nothing new. From sailors in the Aegean to divers in the Mediterranean, from Greek artisans to Roman scholars, people have always known that the shadow beneath the waves carried teeth, and they left us words and images to prove it. So what do we do with all of this hundreds of millions of years of shark stories, etched into fossils, bones, and even art? On one level, it's thrilling. Sharks have attacked just about everything that's ever shared their oceans. Other sharks, flying reptiles, giant turtles, mosasaurs, whales, and eventually, us. Each fossil we've seen is like a case file from nature's oldest crime scene. But on another level, it's humbling. Sharks aren't just villains in a monster movie. They're survivors. They've outlasted 5 mass extinctions. They were here before the first forests, before the first dinosaurs, before the first humans picked up tools. They're still here today, doing the same thing they've always done, keeping the balance in the oceans that sustain life on Earth. And yet, for all their fearsome reputation, sharks are far more threatened by us than we are by them. Fewer than 10 people die each year from shark attacks worldwide. Meanwhile, we kill an estimated 100 million sharks every year, mostly for their fins, for soup, or as bycatch in industrial fishing. The real nightmare isn't sharks attacking us. It's the thought of an ocean without them. Remove sharks, and entire ecosystems collapse. Coral reefs, fisheries, even the climate feel the ripple. That's why their story matters. Not just because it's dramatic, though it is, but because it reminds us that sharks are an ancient lineage worth protecting. They've ruled the seas for nearly 500 million years. But whether they'll survive the next century depends on us. So the next time you stand on a beach and catch yourself staring nervously at the waves, remember this: the shadow you fear has been there longer than anything else alive today. It's not just a predator. It's a living fossil, a guardian of balance, a creature that connects our world to a time before history. Sharks have always been the dark shape beneath the waves. The question now is whether we'll let them keep swimming in the centuries to come. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the incredible history of sharks, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Leave a comment below and tell me, which prehistoric shark attack amazed you the most? Cladoselache the cannibal, Cretoxyrhina the Ginsu Shark, or the mighty Megalodon? And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story from the wild and ancient side of our planet's history. Thanks for watching. And until next time, keep your eyes on the waves.